Sarah had become a ghost. For 2 years, she had lived in the shadows of the border village, keeping her head down and her daughter hidden. She worked as a seamstress in a shop that asked no questions, paid her rent in cash, and never spoke to her neighbors beyond polite nods. She had no friends, no family, no pack. Just Nadia, with her dark curls and her impossible golden eyes, and the constant terror that someone would find them. The Alpha King's men had come through the village twice in those 2 years, searching for deserters and criminals. Both times, Sarah had barricaded herself in the cellar with Nadia pressed to her chest, a hand over the child's mouth to muffle any sound. Both times, they had passed her by without a second glance. She was nobody, a human seamstress with a fatherless child, beneath the notice of wolves who hunted bigger prey. But today was different. Today, the Alpha King himself had come to the border. Sarah heard the news from the baker's wife, who heard it from the blacksmith, who heard it from a traveling merchant. King Lucian was touring the outer territories, inspecting the villages that paid tribute to his crown. He would arrive by midday, hold audience in the town square, and depart before nightfall. The whole village was buzzing with excitement and fear, rushing to clean their storefronts and press their finest clothes. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She closed the seamstress shop early, claiming illness, and hurried through the back alleys toward her tiny rented room above the tanner's workshop. Nadia was with the elderly widow next door, the only person Sarah trusted to watch her daughter while she worked. She would collect the child, pack their meager belongings, and slip out through the northern gate before anyone noticed they were gone. She had done it before. She could do it again. But when she rounded the corner to her street, she stopped dead. Soldiers filled the narrow lane. Not the border patrol she had hidden from before, but royal guards in gleaming armor, their cloaks bearing the silver wolf crest of the crown. They had formed a perimeter around the tanner's shop, and in the center of them stood a man who made Sarah's heart stop beating. 2 years had not changed him. He was still tall and broad-shouldered, still carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had never been denied anything in his life. His dark hair was shorter than she remembered, his jaw rougher with stubble, but those eyes, storm gray and piercing, were exactly the same. They had haunted her dreams every night since she fled. They belonged to the man who had given her a daughter and never knew it. King Lucian stood in the street outside her home, and in his arms was Nadia. The world tilted. Sarah grabbed the wall for support, bile rising in her throat. The widow must have brought Nadia outside when the soldiers arrived, too frightened or too curious to stay hidden. And now the Alpha King was holding Sarah's daughter, staring down at her with an expression Sarah couldn't read. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and flee, to disappear into the crowd and never look back. But her feet wouldn't move. Her eyes were locked on her daughter's face, on those golden eyes that were staring up at the king with innocent curiosity. Lucian's whole body went rigid. Sarah watched the realization dawn across his features like sunrise breaking over mountains. The shock, the confusion, and then something deeper. Something raw and primal that made the wolf inside her, the wolf she had suppressed for 2 long years, whimper with recognition. He knew. One look at those eyes and he knew. His gaze lifted from the child and swept the crowd, searching, hunting. When it landed on Sarah, she felt the impact like a physical blow. For one endless moment they simply stared at each other, the king and the woman who had vanished from his bed in the dead of night, taking a secret that was never hers alone to keep. Then Lucian spoke, and his voice carried the weight of command that had toppled kingdoms. "Bring her to me." Sarah didn't run. She couldn't. The guards were already moving toward her, and Nadia was reaching out with chubby arms, calling the only word she knew how to say. "Mama!" The sound shattered something in Lucian's face. He looked at the child in his arms, then at Sarah being escorted through the crowd, and when their eyes met again, she saw something that terrified her more than anger ever could. She saw hunger, possession, the look of a wolf who had just found something it would never let go. "You have a great deal of explaining to do," Lucian said, as the guards brought her to stand before him. His voice was soft, controlled, but she could hear the storm beneath it. "Starting with why you stole my daughter and disappeared." Sarah's throat closed around her words. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, had rehearsed explanations and excuses and pleas in the dark hours of the night. But now, standing before Lucian with Nadia still cradled in his arms, every carefully prepared speech vanished like smoke. "Not here," she managed. "Please, not in front of everyone." Lucian's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would refuse, would drag her secrets into the light for the entire village to witness. But then his gaze dropped to Nadia, who was playing with the silver clasp on his cloak, completely oblivious to the tension crackling around her. Something in his expression shifted, softened, and he gave a curt nod. "My carriage. Now." The guards escorted her through the crowd, and Sarah felt every stare like a knife between her ribs. These were her neighbors, the people she had lived among for 2 years, and they watched her being led away by the Alpha King with expressions ranging from shock to suspicion. She would never be able to come back here. Even if Lucian let her go, which she doubted, her carefully constructed life had just collapsed around her feet. The royal carriage was massive, all dark wood and velvet curtains, with the silver wolf emblazoned on its doors. Lucian climbed in first, still holding Nadia, and Sarah followed on trembling legs. The door closed behind them, and suddenly the noise of the crowd fell away, leaving only the three of them in the muffled silence. Nadia squirmed in Lucian's arms, reaching for her mother. He let her go reluctantly, his fingers brushing the child's dark curls as Sarah gathered her daughter close. The tenderness in that gesture made something twist in Sarah's chest. "Start talking." Lucian's voice was ice wrapped in velvet. "2 years ago, you vanished from my bed without a word. I searched for you for months. I thought you were dead." His hands clenched into fists on his knees. "And now I find you hiding in a border village with a child who has my eyes. My eyes, Sarah. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own blood?" Sarah pressed her face to Nadia's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter, gathering what little courage she had left. "I had to leave," she whispered. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice." "No choice?" The words came out sharp as a blade. "You were carrying my child, my heir, and you chose to run away and raise her in poverty, hiding from your own kind, suppressing your wolf until you barely smell like a shifter anymore." He leaned forward, and she saw the hurt beneath his anger, raw and bleeding. "We had something, Sarah. I thought we had something real, and you threw it away without even telling me why." Tears burned in her eyes. She remembered those weeks in the palace, the stolen moments and whispered confessions, the way he had made her feel seen for the first time in her life. She had loved him. She had loved him desperately, recklessly, and leaving him had nearly destroyed her, but staying would have been worse. "Lady Katrine," she said quietly. Lucian went still. The name hung in the air between them like a curse. "What about her?" Sarah lifted her head, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "The night before I left, she came to my room. She told me you were promised to her, that the betrothal had been arranged since childhood. She said I was nothing but a temporary distraction, a low-born wolf you were using to warm your bed until the wedding." Her voice cracked. "She showed me the betrothal contract, Lucian. Your signature was on it." His face had gone pale. "Sarah?" "She told me that if I didn't leave, she would make sure I disappeared permanently, and she made it very clear that she had the power to do it." Sarah's arms tightened around Nadia, the memory of that night flooding back with sickening clarity. "I was pregnant and alone and terrified, so I ran. I ran because I thought it was the only way to keep my baby safe." Silence filled the carriage. Lucian stared at her, his expression caught between fury and devastation. She watched emotions war across his face: anger at Katrine, guilt for what Sarah had endured, grief for the years he had lost with his daughter. "The betrothal was dissolved 3 months after you disappeared," he said finally. His voice was rough, hollowed out. "When I discovered what Katrine had done to you, I banished her from court and broke the contract. I never wanted her, Sarah. I only ever wanted you." The words hit her like a physical blow. All this time, all these years of running and hiding and being afraid, and the threat had been gone almost from the beginning. She could have come home. She could have raised Nadia in the palace, at Lucian's side, surrounded by safety and comfort instead of poverty and fear. "I didn't know," she breathed. "How could I have known?" Lucian reached across the space between them and took her hand. His grip was firm and warm and achingly familiar. "You couldn't have," he said quietly. "But you know now, and I'm not letting you disappear again." The journey to the capital took 3 days. Lucian had insisted they travel together in the royal carriage, with guards flanking them on all sides. Sarah had tried to argue, had tried to suggest that she and Nadia could follow behind in a separate vehicle, but he had refused with a look that left no room for negotiation. She was going to the palace, and she was going in his carriage, and that was the end of it. So she sat across from the Alpha King for 3 days, watching him learn how to be a father. It started awkwardly. Nadia was shy at first, hiding her face in Sarah's shoulder whenever Lucian tried to speak to her. But children were resilient creatures, and curiosity eventually won out over caution. By the second morning, Nadia was climbing into Lucian's lap to examine the medals on his coat. By the second afternoon, she was demanding that he tell her stories. By the second evening, she had fallen asleep in his arms, her small fingers curled around his thumb, and Lucian had looked at Sarah with an expression that made her heart ache. "She's perfect," he murmured, his voice thick with wonder. "How did you do this alone? How did you raise her without any help?" Sarah tucked a blanket around Nadia's sleeping form, careful not to wake her. The question brought back memories she usually tried not to think about: the terror of giving birth in a stranger's home, the endless nights pacing with a colicky infant, the bone-deep exhaustion of working and nursing and hiding all at once. She had survived on sheer stubbornness and love for her daughter. There had been nothing else. "I did what I had to do," she said simply. "She's my whole world, Lucian. I would have done anything to keep her safe." He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb stroking absently over Nadia's tiny fingers. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have been there. I should have protected you both." He looked up at her, and she saw the guilt carved into every line of his face. "When you disappeared, I tore the kingdom apart looking for you. I interrogated everyone in the palace, sent search parties to every territory, offered rewards that could have bankrupted the treasury. And all along, Katrine knew exactly what she had done. She watched me suffer and said nothing." The hatred in his voice when he spoke Katrine's name made Sarah shiver. She remembered the woman clearly, beautiful and cold, with ice-blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. Katrine had cornered her in a dark corridor, had spoken of making her disappear with the same casual tone one might use to discuss the weather. Sarah had believed every word. She still did. "What happened to her?" Sarah asked. "After you banished her?" "She fled to the Eastern Territories, married some minor lord who didn't know her reputation." Lucian's jaw tightened. "I should have had her executed for what she did. I wanted to. But I had no proof, only suspicions, and the council wouldn't support a death sentence without evidence." "She's still out there?" The fear crept back into Sarah's voice before she could stop it. "Lucian, if she finds out I've returned—" "She won't touch you." The words came out hard as iron. "I failed to protect you once. I will not fail again. You and Nadia will be under my guard every moment of every day, and if Katrine so much as looks in your direction, I will end her myself. Counsel be damned. The ferocity of his declaration should have frightened her. Instead, it made something warm bloom in her chest, a feeling she had tried to bury 2 years ago, when she had crept out of his chambers and into the cold night. She had loved him then. She was terrified to realize she might still love him now. Why do you care so much? The question slipped out before she could stop it. I left you. I kept your daughter from you for 2 years. You should hate me. Lucian leaned forward, careful not to disturb the sleeping child in his arms. His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. I could never hate you, Sarah. I've tried. Believe me, I've tried. A sad smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face. Every time I heard a woman's laugh, I listened for your voice. You haunted me for 2 years, and now that I've found you again, I'm not going to waste time on anger. He reached across the space between them and brushed a strand of hair from her face. I just want to understand. I want to know you again, and I want to be a father to my daughter. Sarah's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. She looked at Nadia, peaceful and innocent, sleeping in the arms of the father she had never known. And she looked at Lucian, this king who had every right to despise her and chose tenderness instead. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to trust again. Then we'll learn together, he said, one day at a time. The palace was exactly as Sarah remembered. Towering spires of gray stone, corridors lined with tapestries and torchlight, the ever-present hum of servants and guards moving through its endless halls. She had spent 3 months here before she fled. 3 months of stolen glances and secret meetings, and a love that had felt too good to be true. Walking through the gates now, with Nadia on her hip and Lucian at her side, felt like stepping back into a dream she had forced herself to wake from. They gave her chambers in the royal wing, just down the corridor from Lucian's own rooms. The suite was larger than any home she had ever lived in. A sitting room with velvet couches and a roaring fireplace, a bedroom with a canopied bed draped in silver silk, and a smaller room that had been hastily converted into a nursery for Nadia. Toys and picture books lined the shelves, and a rocking horse stood in the corner, its painted eyes bright with welcome. This is too much, Sarah breathed, taking it all in. It's not nearly enough. Lucian stood in the doorway, watching as Nadia toddled toward the rocking horse with a shriek of delight. You spent 2 years in a room above a tanner's workshop, Sarah. You deserve more than I can ever give you. She turned to look at him. This man who had once been her entire world. He seemed different now than he had 2 years ago, older somehow, though the lines around his eyes had more to do with exhaustion than age. She wondered how many sleepless nights he had spent searching for her, how many mornings he had woken to the weight of her absence. What happened to you? She asked quietly. After I left, what did it do to you? Lucian was silent for a long moment. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, giving them privacy from the guards and servants who lingered in the hall. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I fell apart. The admission came out raw, unvarnished. For months, I could barely function. I neglected my duties, ignored my advisors, snapped at anyone who came too close. The council thought I was losing my mind. Some of them probably hoped I was. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. My wolf was the worst. He howled for you constantly, clawing at the edges of my mind, demanding that I find you. Some nights, the only way I could sleep was to shift and run until I collapsed from exhaustion. Sarah's heart clenched. She had known leaving would hurt him. She hadn't known it would break him. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't want to cause you pain. I thought I was protecting Nadia, protecting myself. I know. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. And I understand why you ran. I do. But I need you to understand something too. He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Those 3 months we had together were the happiest of my life. Before you, I had never let anyone past my walls. I had never trusted anyone enough to be vulnerable. And then you came along with your quiet strength and your stubborn kindness, and you saw through every mask I wore. Sarah remembered. She remembered the night he had told her about his father, a cruel king who had ruled through fear, who had beaten his son for showing weakness and called it training. She remembered holding Lucian in the dark while he shook with grief for a mother who had died protecting him from his father's rage. She remembered thinking that she would do anything to take away his pain. I saw you too, she said softly. The real you. Not the king, not the alpha. Just Lucian. That's why it destroyed me when you vanished. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. Because you were the only person who had ever truly seen me. And when you left, I thought it meant you had looked at the real me and decided I wasn't worth staying for. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. That's not why I left. That was never why. I know that now. He brushed the tears away with gentle fingers. But it took 2 years for the wound to scab over. And now that you're here, standing in front of me, I can feel it tearing open again. His voice dropped to a murmur. I'm terrified, Sarah. I'm terrified that you'll run again. That I'll wake up tomorrow and you'll be gone. And this time, I won't survive it. She reached up and covered his hand with her own, pressing it more firmly against her face. I'm not running, she said. Not anymore. I'm tired of hiding. Tired of being afraid. Whatever happens next, I want to face it here. With you. Something in his expression cracked open. Hope and relief and a desperate, aching love that stole the breath from her lungs. He didn't kiss her. He simply rested his forehead against hers and breathed. And for a long moment, they stood together in the silence, learning how to be close again. In the corner, Nadia giggled as she rocked back and forth on the painted horse, completely unaware that her parents were rebuilding a bridge that had burned 2 years ago. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rediscovery. Lucian came to her chambers every morning to have breakfast with Nadia, sitting cross-legged on the nursery floor while their daughter fed him bites of porridge and babbled stories he pretended to understand. He joined them for walks in the palace gardens, letting Nadia ride on his shoulders while Sarah pointed out the flowers she remembered from her time here before. He read bedtime stories in voices that made Nadia shriek with laughter, and he lingered in the doorway after she fell asleep, watching his daughter with an expression of quiet wonder that made Sarah's heart ache. He was courting them, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with presence, with time, with the steady, patient devotion of a man determined to earn back what he had lost. And slowly, despite her best efforts to guard her heart, Sarah felt herself falling again. It happened on a night when Nadia had been particularly difficult to settle. Teething pain had kept her fussy and crying, and by the time she finally drifted off, Sarah was exhausted, her nerves frayed to breaking. She had collapsed onto the couch in her sitting room, too tired to move, when a soft knock came at the door. Lucian entered with a tray of tea and honey cakes, his brow creased with concern. I heard her crying from down the hall. Is she all right? Teething. Sarah rubbed her eyes, too tired for formality. She'll be fine by morning. She just needed to exhaust herself first. He set the tray on the table and lowered himself onto the couch beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. And what about you? When do you get to exhaust yourself and sleep? She laughed weakly. Mothers don't get that luxury. They should. He poured her a cup of tea and pressed it into her hands, his fingers brushing hers. You've been carrying this alone for 2 years, Sarah. You don't have to anymore. Let me help. Let me be here for both of you. The kindness in his voice undid something inside her. She had been holding herself together with sheer force of will for so long, refusing to show weakness, refusing to lean on anyone. But sitting here in the firelight with Lucian's warmth beside her and the scent of chamomile rising from her cup, she felt the walls she had built begin to crumble. "I don't know how to let someone help me," she admitted. "I've been alone so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to have someone to rely on." "Then let me remind you." He took the teacup from her trembling hands and set it aside. Then he turned to face her, his gray eyes soft in the flickering light. "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. No matter how many times you push me away, no matter how long it takes you to trust me again, I will be here. Because I love you. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day of the last 2 years." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and luminous. Sarah stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had told herself so many lies over the years, that what they'd had wasn't real, that he had probably forgotten her, that she was nothing but a passing fancy to a king who could have anyone he wanted. But the truth was written plainly on his face, in the vulnerability of his expression, in the way his hands trembled slightly as they reached for hers. "Lucian," she breathed, "tell me I'm not alone in this." His voice was rough, almost pleading. "Tell me you feel it too, this pull between us, this thing that has survived everything we've been through. Tell me I'm not imagining it." She should have been careful. She should have protected herself, held back, kept her distance. But she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of running from the one thing she had ever truly wanted. "You're not imagining it," she whispered. "I love you. I've always loved you. Even when I was running, even when I was hiding, I never stopped." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry, and full of 2 years of longing, his hands cupping her face as his mouth claimed hers. She melted into him, her fingers gripping the front of his shirt, and for a moment there was nothing in the world but the two of them, the heat of his body, the taste of his lips, the overwhelming rightness of being in his arms again. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Lucian pressed his forehead to hers and laughed, a shaky, joyful sound that made her smile despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought I'd lost you forever," he murmured. "I thought I'd never get to hold you like this again." "I'm here." She kissed him softly, a promise sealed with lips and breath. "I'm not going anywhere." They stayed tangled together on the couch until the fire burned low, trading kisses and whispered confessions, making up for all the time they had lost. And when Sarah finally drifted off to sleep in Lucian's arms, she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 long years. Safe. She felt completely, utterly safe. She didn't see the shadow that passed by her window. She didn't notice the figure watching from the garden below, ice blue eyes fixed on the silhouette of the king holding the woman who was supposed to be dead. The happiness lasted exactly 12 days. Sarah had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have the life she had dreamed of. She woke each morning in chambers that felt like home, spent her days with Nadia and Lucian, and fell asleep each night wrapped in the arms of the man she loved. The palace staff had warmed to her quickly, won over by her gentle manner, and the obvious adoration the king showered upon her. Even the council, those stern-faced lords who had once looked down on her low-born status, seemed to accept that she would soon be their queen. Then the letter arrived. It was delivered by a servant Sarah didn't recognize, a quiet woman with downcast eyes who pressed the sealed envelope into her hands and disappeared before she could ask any questions. The wax seal bore no sigil, no identifying mark, but when Sarah broke it open and unfolded the paper inside, her blood turned to ice. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, achingly familiar. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could waltz back into the palace and steal what belongs to me? Enjoy your borrowed happiness while it lasts. The child should never have been born. I intend to correct that mistake. C. The letter slipped from Sarah's numb fingers. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Katrine was here. Katrine knew about Nadia, and she was coming for them. She found Lucian in the council chamber, surrounded by advisors discussing border disputes and trade agreements. The moment she burst through the doors, her face white as bone, he was on his feet. "Clear the room," he commanded. The advisors scattered without question. Sarah thrust the letter into his hands, her whole body shaking. She watched his expression darken as he read, watched the fury build behind his eyes until she thought he might shift right there in the council chamber. "Where did this come from?" His voice was barely controlled. "A servant I've never seen before. She was gone before I could stop her." Sarah's voice cracked. "Lucian, she's threatening Nadia. She wants to hurt our daughter." He crushed the letter in his fist, his knuckles white. "I'll have every guard in the palace searching for Katrine within the hour. She won't get anywhere near you or Nadia." "She already got a letter into my hands," Sarah said desperately. "She had a servant deliver it directly to me. That means she has people inside the palace, people loyal to her. How do we know who to trust?" The question hung in the air, ugly and unanswerable. Lucian's jaw tightened. He crossed the room and took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I will protect you," he said fiercely. "Both of you. I don't care if I have to tear this kingdom apart stone by stone. Katrine will not touch our daughter." Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to sink into his certainty and let it wash away her fear. But she had underestimated Katrine once before, and it had cost her 2 years of her life. She would not make that mistake again. "I want guards on Nadia at all times," she said, "and I want to be with her. I don't want her out of my sight until Katrine is found." "Done." Lucian pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I'll assign my most trusted men to the nursery. No one gets in or out without my explicit permission." The next 3 days were agony. Sarah barely slept, barely ate, her eyes constantly scanning every shadow for threats that might not come. Nadia sensed her mother's tension and grew fussy and clingy, which only made the guilt worse. She was supposed to protect her daughter, supposed to give her a life free from fear, and instead she had brought her into the lion's den. Lucian launched a full investigation into Katrine's whereabouts. His spies reported that she had left her husband in the Eastern Territories months ago, her marriage dissolved under mysterious circumstances. She had been spotted in several towns along the border, always moving, never staying long enough to be caught. She was hunting them. She had been hunting them even before Lucian found Sarah in that village. "She must have had people watching me," Sarah realized, horror dawning. "All those years I was hiding, she knew exactly where I was. She was just waiting for the right moment." "The moment I found you," Lucian said grimly. "She wanted you to stay hidden, to stay away from me forever. When I brought you back to the palace, she lost control of the situation." "So she's going to take it back." Sarah's voice was hollow. "By destroying everything I love." Lucian pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding, could feel the barely leashed rage vibrating through his body. "She will fail," he growled. "I swear to you, Sarah, she will fail, and she will pay for every moment of fear she has caused you." But even as he spoke the words, neither of them heard the soft click of the nursery door opening down the hall. The scream shattered the silence of the palace. Sarah knew that voice. She had heard it cry out in hunger, in frustration, in sleepy protest, but she had never heard it scream like this, high and terrified and full of a fear no 2-year-old should ever know. She was running before she realized she had moved. The corridors blurred past her, her wolf surging to the surface with a force she had never felt before. Lucian was beside her, his footsteps thundering on the marble floors, guards shouting and scrambling in their wake. The nursery door hung open, swinging gently on its hinges, and when Sarah burst through it, her heart stopped beating. The guards were on the floor, both of them crumpled like discarded dolls, blood pooling beneath their heads. The window was open, curtains billowing in the night breeze, and the crib was empty. Nadia was gone. The sound that tore from Sarah's throat wasn't human. It was the howl of a wolf whose pup had been taken, raw and primal, and full of a grief so deep it had no bottom. She collapsed against the crib, her hands gripping the wooden rails, and screamed until her voice broke. Lucien caught her before she hit the floor. He held her against his chest while she sobbed, his own body shaking with barely contained rage. Guards flooded the room, shouting orders, but Sarah couldn't hear any of it. All she could see was the empty crib. All she could feel was the gaping wound where her daughter had been. "Find her!" Lucian snarled at his men. "Search every inch of this palace. Search the grounds, the stables, the city. No one sleeps until my daughter is found." The guards scattered. Lucian lifted Sarah in his arms and carried her to a chair, kneeling before her, his hands cupping her face. "Look at me," he said urgently. "Sarah, look at me. We will get her back. Do you understand? We will get her back." She took her. Sarah's voice was hollow, scraped raw. "Katrine took my baby. She's going to kill her, Lucian. She said she would correct the mistake. She's going to—" "She won't." His voice was iron and fire. "Katrine wants to hurt us. That means she'll keep Nadia alive as leverage. She wants something, and she'll use our daughter to get it." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they made Sarah want to vomit. Her daughter was in the hands of a woman who had threatened to murder her, a woman driven by jealousy and hatred and years of festering resentment. Every moment that passed was a moment Nadia spent terrified and alone, crying for a mother who wasn't there. "This is my fault." The realization crashed over her like a wave. "I should have taken her and run the moment I got that letter. I should have disappeared again, gone somewhere Katrine could never find us. Instead, I stayed, and now she's—" "Stop!" Lucian's grip on her face tightened. "This is not your fault. This is Katrine's doing, and Katrine's alone. You didn't cause this. You didn't ask for any of this. But I brought her here." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I brought my baby into this palace, into Katrine's reach, because I wanted to believe we could be happy. I was selfish, Lucian. I wanted you so badly that I put my daughter at risk." The guilt was crushing, suffocating, a weight so heavy she thought it might kill her. She had spent 2 years protecting Nadia, keeping her hidden, keeping her safe, and in a matter of weeks, she had destroyed everything. Her daughter was gone because she had dared to hope for something more than survival. Lucian pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her lips. "Listen to me. Nadia is alive. I can feel it. My wolf can feel it. She is our daughter, our blood, and I would know if she were gone." His voice cracked. "We are going to find her, Sarah. And when we do, I am going to make Katrine pay for every tear you've shed tonight." A commotion in the hallway made them both turn. A guard appeared in the doorway, his face pale and grim. "Your Majesty, we found something at the eastern gate." He held out a piece of parchment, sealed with a sigil Sarah recognized, the serpent and rose of Katrine's family crest. Lucian took it with steady hands and broke the seal, his eyes scanning the contents. Sarah watched his expression harden into something terrible, something that promised violence. "What does it say?" she whispered. He looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw fear in his eyes. "She wants to trade," he said quietly. "Nadia's life for yours. She wants you to come alone to the old watchtower at dawn. If you don't, she'll throw our daughter from the top." The world narrowed to a single point of clarity: her daughter or her life. It wasn't even a question. "Then I go," Sarah said. "Sarah, I go." She rose to her feet, her wolf settling into a cold and deadly calm. "She can do whatever she wants to me, but she will not hurt my child." The old watchtower stood at the edge of the kingdom, a crumbling relic from a war fought centuries ago. Sarah approached it alone, just as Katrine had demanded, though she knew Lucian was somewhere behind her with a contingent of his best soldiers. He had refused to let her go without a plan, had spent the hours before dawn mapping out every possible approach, every potential escape route. But in the end, they both knew that Sarah would have to face Katrine by herself. Any sign of treachery, and Nadia would die. The tower loomed against the gray sky, its stones dark with age and neglect. Sarah climbed the winding stairs with her heart in her throat, her wolf pacing restlessly beneath her skin. She could smell her daughter now, that sweet, familiar scent that had been her anchor for 2 years, mixed with the cold perfume of the woman who had stolen her. Katrine waited at the top. She stood near the tower's edge, silhouetted against the pale dawn, with Nadia clutched in her arms. The child was crying softly, reaching toward Sarah with desperate hands, and it took every ounce of willpower Sarah possessed not to lunge forward and rip her daughter away. "You came." Katrine's voice was silk over poison. She looked exactly as Sarah remembered, beautiful and cruel, with ice-blue eyes that held nothing resembling humanity. "I wasn't sure you would. 2 years of running, and suddenly you found your courage? Give me my daughter." Sarah's voice was steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "You have me. That's what you wanted. Let her go." Katrine laughed, a brittle sound that echoed off the ancient stones. "What I wanted was for you to disappear forever. I gave you a chance to live, you know. I told you to run, and you did, like a good little coward. But then you had to go and have his child. You had to create living proof that he chose you over me. He was never yours to begin with." The words came out sharper than Sarah intended. "He never loved you, Katrine. The betrothal was an arrangement, nothing more." Something ugly flickered across Katrine's face. Her grip on Nadia tightened, and the child whimpered in distress. "He would have learned to love me," she hissed. "I would have given him heirs, given him everything a queen should provide. But you ruined it. You, with your common blood and your pathetic weakness. You stole him from me, and now I'm going to take everything from you." She stepped closer to the edge of the tower, and Sarah's heart stopped. "Wait." She held up her hands, her voice cracking. "Please. I'll do whatever you want. I'll leave the kingdom. I'll never see Lucian again. I'll disappear so completely that no one will ever find me. Just give me my daughter. Please, Katrine. She's just a baby. She's innocent in all of this." For a moment, something flickered in Katrine's ice-blue eyes. Something that might have been hesitation, or might have been cruelty savoring the kill. "Innocent?" She tilted her head, studying Nadia with cold curiosity. "Perhaps. But she has his eyes. Every time I look at her, I see him choosing you. I see everything I was supposed to have." Her expression hardened. "No. The child dies. And then you die. And Lucian will spend the rest of his miserable life knowing that he couldn't protect either of you." She turned toward the edge, and Sarah's wolf exploded. The shift was faster than anything she had ever experienced, her body transforming in a heartbeat, fur rippling across her skin as she launched herself at Katrine. She caught the woman's arm in her jaws, wrenching her backward, and Nadia tumbled from her grip with a shriek. Time slowed. Sarah saw her daughter falling, saw the stone floor rushing up to meet her, and knew she couldn't reach her in time. Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Then a blur of gray fur shot through the tower window. Lucian caught Nadia in his massive jaws, gentle as a mother wolf carrying her pup, and rolled across the floor to cushion the impact. He shifted back to human form in an instant, cradling their daughter against his chest, his golden eyes blazing with relief and fury. "Papa," Nadia sobbed, burying her face in his neck. Sarah didn't have time to feel relief. Katrine was screaming, thrashing beneath her, clawing at her muzzle with desperate hands. She tasted blood, Katrine's blood, and her wolf howled for more. This woman had threatened her child. This woman had tried to murder her baby. Every instinct demanded that she finish it, that she tear out Katrine's throat and end the threat forever. Sarah! Lucian's voice cut through the red haze of rage. Sarah, stop! It's over! We have Nadia! She's safe! She looked at her daughter, whole and alive in her father's arms, and the killing fury slowly drained away. She released Katrine and stepped back, shifting to human form, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. Katrine lay on the cold stones, bleeding and broken, staring up at the sky with hatred still burning in her eyes. This isn't over, she spat. It will never be over. Lucian handed Nadia to Sarah, then turned to face the woman who had caused them so much pain. His expression was carved from ice. Yes, he said quietly. It is. Katrine was taken to the dungeons in chains. The soldiers who had followed Lucian to the tower escorted her down the winding stairs, deaf to her screams of protest and promises of revenge. Sarah watched her go with Nadia clutched tightly in her arms, her daughter's face buried against her neck, small fingers tangled in her hair. She was shaking. They both were. But Nadia was alive and warm and whole, and nothing else mattered. Lucian wrapped them both in his arms, surrounding them with his warmth and his scent and the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long time, the three of them tangled together at the top of the crumbling tower, while the sun rose over the kingdom and painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. I almost lost you, Lucian murmured against Sarah's hair. Both of you. When I saw her holding Nadia at the edge, I thought... His voice broke. I thought I was going to watch my daughter die. You saved her. Sarah pulled back enough to look at him, tears streaming down her face. You caught her. If you hadn't been there... I will always be there. He cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes fierce with emotion. For both of you. For the rest of my life, I will be there. I swear it on my blood, on my crown, on everything I am. The journey back to the palace was a blur. Sarah refused to let go of Nadia, keeping her daughter pressed against her chest even as exhaustion dragged at her bones. Lucian rode beside them in the carriage, his hand resting on her knee, his presence a constant anchor in the storm of her thoughts. By the time they reached the palace gates, Nadia had fallen asleep, her breathing soft and even, her small face peaceful at last. The healers examined them both and declared them unharmed, though they recommended rest and quiet for the coming days. Sarah had no intention of arguing. She carried Nadia to the nursery, tucked her into the crib that had been so terrifyingly empty just hours before, and sat in the rocking chair beside it, unable to look away. Lucian found her there as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. She's safe, he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. The guards have been tripled. The palace has been searched from top to bottom. Katrine's accomplices have been identified and arrested. No one will ever get to her again. Sarah nodded, but she couldn't make herself relax. The fear was still there, coiled in her chest like a living thing. She had spent 2 years running, 2 years looking over her shoulder, and one morning of terror had brought it all flooding back. What happens to Katrine? She asked. She'll face trial before the council. The charges include kidnapping the royal heir, attempted murder, and treason. Lucian's jaw tightened. The sentence for any one of those crimes is death. She will never threaten our family again. Our family. The words wrapped around Sarah's heart and squeezed. I've been thinking, Lucian continued, his voice dropping lower, about what I want, about what I should have done 2 years ago, before everything went wrong. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring, a band of white gold set with a deep amber stone that caught the light like captured fire. This was my mother's, he said. She gave it to me before she died, made me promise that I would only offer it to the woman I loved with my whole heart. He looked up at her, and she saw everything in his eyes: hope and fear, and a love so vast it seemed to fill the entire room. I should have given it to you 2 years ago. I should have asked you to be my queen before you ever had a reason to run, but I was a fool, and I wasted so much time. He took her hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he held the ring at the tip of her finger. Sirah, you are the mother of my child. You are the other half of my soul. You have survived things that would have broken anyone else, and you did it with a strength and grace that humbles me every single day. His voice cracked. I don't want to waste another moment. I want you beside me for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? She looked at the ring, then at the man kneeling before her, then at the crib where their daughter slept peacefully. She thought of the years she had spent hiding, the loneliness and fear and desperate hope that had kept her going. She thought of the life she could have, the life she deserved, with this man who loved her, and a family that was finally, truly hers. Yes. The word came out as a sob and a laugh all at once. Yes, Lucian. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers and smiled. A real smile, bright and unguarded, the smile of a man who had finally found his way home. I love you, he whispered. I love you too. She kissed him again, her heart so full it ached. I always have. I always will. In the crib beside them, Nadia stirred and mumbled something that sounded almost like, Mama. Sarah laughed through her tears, and Lucian pulled her close, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the future didn't seem frightening at all. The wedding took place on the first warm day of summer, in the palace gardens where Sarah and Lucian had walked together during those fragile early weeks of reunion. White roses climbed the trellises, their petals soft as whispered promises, and golden ribbons fluttered from the branches of ancient oaks. The entire kingdom had turned out to witness their king marry the woman who had captured his heart. And for once, Sarah didn't mind being seen. She walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk, with wildflowers woven through her dark hair and her mother's locket resting against her heart. But the thing that made her smile widest was the tiny figure toddling beside her, clutching a basket of rose petals in chubby fists. Nadia had insisted on being part of the ceremony, and neither of her parents could deny her anything. Lucian waited at the altar, resplendent in black and silver, his golden eyes bright with unshed tears. When Sarah reached him and placed her hand in his, she felt the bond between them pulse with warmth, stronger than it had ever been. 2 years of separation, months of danger and fear, and somehow they had found their way back to each other. Somehow, against all odds, they had become a family. I spent 2 years as a ghost, Sarah said when it came time for her vows. I hid in shadows and lived in fear and convinced myself that I didn't deserve anything more. But you found me. You saw me when I had forgotten how to be seen, and you loved me, both of us, with a devotion that taught me what it means to be home. She squeezed his hands, her voice trembling with emotion. I promise to stand beside you for the rest of my days. I promise to face every storm with you, to celebrate every joy, to build a life worthy of the love we share. You are my heart, Lucian. You always have been. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles before speaking his own vows. I was lost before you, he said simply, and when you disappeared, I thought I would never find my way again. But you came back to me. You brought our daughter into my life, and you gave me a reason to be more than just a king. His voice dropped to a murmur meant only for her. I promise to protect you. I promise to cherish you. I promise to love you with everything I am, until my last breath and beyond. You are my mate, my queen, my home, and I will spend every day proving that I deserve you. The officiant pronounced them mated and married, and when Lucian kissed her, the crowd erupted into cheers that seemed to shake the very sky. Nadia clapped her hands and shrieked with delight, scattering the last of her rose petals into the air, and Sarah laughed against her husband's lips, happier than she had ever imagined possible. The months that followed were filled with joy. Nadia thrived in the palace, growing bolder and brighter with each passing day, her golden eyes sparkling with mischief as she toddled through the halls with guards trailing helplessly behind her. Lucian proved to be the devoted father Sarah had always known he could be, patient and playful and utterly besotted with his daughter. And Sarah herself began to heal, the scars of 2 years in hiding slowly fading beneath the warmth of the life she had built. On the first anniversary of their wedding, she gave Lucian another gift. Twins, the healer said, beaming. A boy and a girl, if I'm not mistaken. Strong heartbeats, both of them. Lucian stared at her, his mouth open, his eyes wide with shock. Then he let out a whoop of joy, swept her into his arms, and spun her around until they were both dizzy with laughter. Twins, he repeated, wonder coloring his voice. We're going to have twins. Sarah pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the flutter of new life beneath her skin. She thought of the scared, lonely woman who had hidden a pregnancy in a border village, convinced she would never know safety or love again. That woman felt like a stranger now, a ghost from another life. She was Sarah, queen of the realm, mother of 3, mate to the Alpha King who had searched the world to find her. She was seen, she was loved, she was finally, irrevocably, home.